His website took off. After 7 months, it had over 1 million page views a month. So I started looking into how to sell precious metals. And my father-in-law was sitting right across from the table, and he said, well, how'd it go this week? Do you have any orders? I said, no, we didn't have any orders this week, or phone calls. I was sort of excited about the phone calls, but he just looked at me and just laughed across my face, like, there is no way this is gonna work. You know, you're just out of your mind. A couple of days before we were hoping to start, I tore my Achilles tendon playing basketball. So I was still a full-time pharmacy manager at the time, and we didn't know how we were going to train our first employee, how we were going to answer the phones. Like we had no idea because we hadn't hired anybody and we didn't have time. We both were full-time pharmacists. But tearing my Achilles tendon, I'll get out of the basketball gym, I call up my wife first, and she's devastated. Several days after that, we were supposed to go to Hawaii, and she's thinking, this is not good. And then the next call went to John, and he said, this might be the clutchest injury of all time. And that turned out to be pretty true, because once I had the surgery, I had some time off work to recover, and I had trained our first employee to work out of his basement to answer calls and to ship orders and to do all the necessary accounting adjustments. At the time, he was working at Medco Pharmacy. So he was working remote, 3rd floor, and on his breaks he'd run down and check off on orders. We structured it just like we would in a pharmacy, where we do narcotic checks and stuff. So it always relied on a 2-person check. So breaks and after hours before his work, he'd be running downstairs, checking off all the stuff, checking off an inventory, recording inventory, and we made a deal with his wife. We said, hey. Basically, I had to make a deal because it was a tough conversation. Hey, can you give us a year? And she thankfully agreed to giving us a year. And it was quite the scene. I mean, we only had 1 employee, but yet we did have a ton of business. And so there would be weekends that my wife and I would come up there, and his family would come downstairs. We'd be all getting together doing we call them ship parties. We just ordering pizza, and everybody. I was packaging up orders. He was packaging up orders. Wives are packaging up orders. He had like a toddler running around. He wasn't packaging up orders. He was knocking over the stack of boxes. But everybody else was packaging up the shipments. And we went like that for about 6 to 8 months. And then I remember one supplier specifically called us up and said, hey, we can't keep doing this. I was like, what? It's like, well, we're shipping to a residential address. It's like, yeah, okay, what's wrong with that? And like, well, we have to pay a residential delivery charge. We got to pay, a signature. It's very expensive to do that. And also, like, John's wife she about had enough. I mean, we were getting, the mail trucks outside the driveway. Neighbors were wondering what's going on. They're out there constantly, 30, 40 boxes at a time, coming down the stairs. Then you're taking up, 100 boxes back up the stairs to ship out. So it was time, and so we decided to look around for a place that we could put a precious metal business that was growing pretty fast. And so we did some research. We looked at some places. We looked at a place in the strip mall. I don't think we ever thought about actually running a retail storefront because we didn't really want to have the staff and deal with the customer service issues that presents. But we looked at some of those places, and then I had looked at a place that wasn't advertised very well, and I think it's a place on Yankee Road, and they're like, where's that at? And these 2 people I talked to was John and a neighbor of his, and they had lived there pretty much their whole lives, and so I thought for sure they would know where it's at, but they didn't. So we started driving out this cornfield, and it's like, I think it's this direction. In my head, I knew where it was kind of geographically. And I was looking across a cornfield, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's the building. I think that's it. Drove over to the building, really protected building, fences all around. A building built for businesses that were startups or intermediate level, where you could rent a spot in the building and rent however much square foot you wanted, and they offered the ability to build it out to suit. So we said, okay, this is interesting. Pulled in the parking lot, and it was like a Sunday night, and I was like, there's no way we're gonna do anything here, but here's the building. It looks good. We should follow up on this, but to my surprise, the door was unlocked. And so I walked into the door and walked down the hall, and there was one person there. He must have, been working on a Sunday night, and it was an architect. And I walked into his office. I said, "Hey, who owns this building? There's somebody I could talk to about leasing a space." He said, "Oh yeah, I got his number. I can give it to you." And within 10 minutes, the owner of the building was over at the building to show us the property. Walked around, had a choice of where we want to go, but the lease rates were amazing, phenomenal. We had perimeter security around the entire property. We had the exterior access control on the building. It was a match made in heaven for a precious metal business. And so we were so excited to have that place picked out. Went to sign the lease. We signed the lease agreement. Still, I think we had one shipping employee besides John. So we had a problem. Every one of our processes relied on a two-person check. It was, and so if he wasn't going to be there at all, or he had to travel, 10, 15 minutes to this building, this is going to be a struggle. So, roughly signed the lease, even though with that problem being in mind, we thought we were going to figure it out, like we'd figured out all the other problems before. And a couple days before John got let go from Medco Pharmacy, they had chose to lay off roughly about a half of the remote pharmacists that were working there. So he was still, I was surprised. I thought he was gonna be happy, he was excited, but when I called him, he's like, yeah, devastated. Like, it's like, well, we know where you're working on, we know where you're gonna go work at on Monday. And he's still in that phase of like, man, am I really doing this? Am I really stepping out of my full-time pharmacy profession and leaving it for good? It was something that I didn't think that was gonna, be a struggle for him, but it was. It was still that early on that we, we're not sure about the risk that would take on for us to go, full-time into the business. So we get, moved into Yankee Road. It was obviously an improvement from the basement. It was a big improvement. And, we grew there for almost 9 years. It was a place that we could save up a decent amount of money because our lease payment was pretty low. We could save that money back for what we eventually would have to need as a company, which is obviously more inventory and a much bigger building for our future growth.